Hey everyone, welcome back to the Book Cave with me, Jenny. So today I'm going to do a reading vlog on nonfiction books centered on animals. And I picked 4 short nonfiction books, and they are The Wisdom of Wolves, Venomous, The Soul of an Octopus, and Other Minds. So I'm definitely interested to see what I'll think of these and if I learn anything about these interesting animals. So why did I pick these particular books? Well, Wisdom of Wolves I picked because wolves are one of my favorite animals. I think they're absolutely beautiful. Venomous I picked up because I just thought the cover was quite striking for one, and it's also supposed to look at how animal venom has driven human evolution and medicine, and that just sounds very interesting to me. And then Soul of an Octopus and Other Minds I picked up because I recently read an article stating that octopuses are basically alien to Earth, that, they've looked at their DNA and they were like, yeah, it had to have come from somewhere else, and just they're so different from other creatures here on Earth. And I'm also reading Children of Rune, which is a science fiction book that has octopus characters in it. And so, yeah, I definitely was interested to pick those up and see what I could learn. So I'm going to dive in and report back. So wolves are one of my favorite animals, and so I saw this book at the library called The Wisdom of Wolves, which is Lessons from the Sawtooth Pack by Jim and Jamie Dutcher. And this is just a short little book, but it is about this experiment that Jim and Jamie did in the Sawtooth Mountains, where they had some semi-tame wolves, and they basically lived with them and learned about their behavior. And then this gives 10 lessons that they basically learned while doing this. And those 10 lessons are earning trust, family first, lead with kindness, one for all, never stop playing, teach the young, respect the old, stay curious, find compassion, cherish one another, and then the wolf in the mirror. And this basically goes through, wolf behavior, and then equates it to lessons that, humans can use as well. For example, the compassion. There was a wolf who was sadly killed by a mountain lion, and that chapter talks about the way the pack grieved, and you could tell they were grieving. And then there's also more than just the Sawtooth Pack in here. There are other wolves talked about that either Jim and Jamie had seen when they went to Alaska with another wolf biologist, or that other wolf biologist had told them. So it's got a lot of information in it. One thing that I didn't like is that the fact that each chapter is about a particular lesson, things aren't always chronological. You may have one chapter that is lessons from the very first wolves that they brought in, and then the next chapter is the third litter that they brought in. And then you go back to the third chapter is back to the first litter. And it does jump around in the chapters themselves as well. And I do feel like some things are repeated a lot throughout the chapters, which I do get that because they're talking about this particular pack that they, certain things like when the wolf was killed by the mountain lion, they would go, obviously, that's part of family first, because obviously to grieve her, they had to consider her family, but that would also be compassion, the fact that they're able to grieve her. But I do feel like the writing is very, very similar when describing what happened and how the wolves reacted. I do feel like it could have been changed a little bit, more into showing how it was a family bond and then more into just compassion instead of just kind of being the same thing, just slightly changed. But this also does have pictures in it, and this is one of my favorite ones, and that is Jim with Komotz's paw, I believe. And Komots was the alpha of the pack. And yet, if you like wolves, or if you like books that deal with human psychology, I would definitely recommend this. It is a short book, less than 250 pages, and it is a very engrossing read, despite the problems I did have with it. And yeah, I'm going to move on to the next book, and I will talk to you all after that. So I read Christy Wilcox's Venomous, How Earth's Deadliest Creatures Mastered Biochemistry, and obviously from the title, this is about venomous creatures. Unlike the cover, it really doesn't go into jellyfish. I really thought it would go more into marine animals, just based on the cover and the introduction, where she herself is interested in marine animal toxins. They are mentioned, but there's not a lot known about them, as she says. And so I feel like that's part of why that's kind of neglected, for lack of a better word, in the book. But I did find this very interesting. There's many chapters about, why some venoms are more painful and like how they work, and then why they may have developed that way. One of the more interesting things I found was the very last chapter is about how we can use some of these compounds to help people. And I did not know that a rather common diabetes drug known as Trulicity is actually made from the Gila monster's venom, or at least, inspired by some of the proteins from there. And I just found that very interesting. And there's plenty in there about how, different like snake venoms could help with pain, and so on and so forth. There's also a whole chapter on platypuses, which they're just very weird creatures. And if you know what a platypus looks like, you already know they're weird. But their venom even is weird. They're the only venomous mammal that uses a stinger instead of biting. They're also the only mammal that uses the venom not for defense or for hunting, but rather in battling for females. And the venom is also unlike any other of the mammal venoms, and it's very similar to several snake venoms and spider venoms. And yet, this was just a very fascinating book. And if you're interested at all in animals, really, I would say check this out. It's really good and easy to understand, very well explained, and it's also relatively short, so you can learn some stuff very quickly. So I finished The Soul of an Octopus, and It was just okay. It really wasn't what I was expecting. It's supposed to be an exploration of octopus's consciousness, but it was more of a memoir. It was more about the author's interaction with the octopuses that were in an aquarium. And I kind of felt like it was lacking. I mean, well, it was still pretty good. There were some parts that were kind of sad, especially with Octavia, Callie, and Karma. Like, Callie and Karma were stuck in a 55-gallon barrel at different times, obviously separately. And then you have Callie, who when they finally move her, she decides to escape and dries out and dies. And it's framed as, oh, she was obviously sentient because she died on her way to freedom. And it's kind of like, yeah, but that's still really sad. I will say some of the best parts is when the author went to look for wild octopuses, and there's one described where her dive partner was taking a photo of one octopus and another octopus was kind of watching him, and that photo is actually included, and I think that one's pretty cool. And I do like the picture of Octavia with her eggs as well. And the other pictures aren't bad, but those are just like my favorite ones. So yeah, I would say this is definitely not what I was expecting. I wound up giving it 2 stars, and I do have the book Other Minds, which is also about octopus's consciousness. And I did read some reviews on Goodreads after finishing this, and they said that the Other Minds was much better. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading that next and, seeing how that one compares. And, hopefully it'll have more of the science instead of it just being, gee, I wonder what they're thinking, kind of. And I could see intelligence in their eyes, which is more what this one was. So I read Other Minds, which is about octopuses as well. And it was definitely better than The Soul of an Octopus. However, I did think it would concentrate more on, like, the octopus's mind and, like, how they might think and how they might, like, experience things. But that was not the case. This was more philosophy than anything. So it was kind of like, do they really think? If they really think, why? Why are their brains so big when they live such short lives? But overall, it was definitely enjoyable, and I didn't feel like it was as much self-insert as Soul of an Octopus was, and it was definitely a very interesting book to read. And considering the fact that I'm reading Children of Rune right now, this became even more interesting because if you know anything about that series or about that book in particular, it does deal with octopuses, and it's definitely interesting to have this background as I'm getting further into that book and, like, learning more about the octopus characters there, and kind of, like, take what I've learned in this book to maybe understand the choices that were made. So those were my thoughts on the 4 animal nonfiction books I read, and I feel like none of them were truly what I was expecting, but I do feel like they were all good in their own way, with the exception of Soul of an Octopus. That one felt like it just focused a little too much on the human side of the equation and didn't dive into the octopus all that much. And yeah, I wish there would have been a lot more about the octopus there, but it was still pretty good for what it was. And yeah, that's everything I have for you today. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, hit that like button and hit subscribe to be notified every time I post new bookish content, and I will see you next time in the book cave.